Now that we've learned how to get from strings to arrays, let's start learning about arrays themselves. We'll start by making an array of characters by splitting on the empty string, as we saw at the end of the last section. We'll just call the array A. By the way, there is a limitation with this splitting on empty string. We'll be seeing that in chapter 5. We can take a look at what A is. It's just what we saw at the end of the last section, like that. All right, now let's take a look at accessing individual elements. With strings, we saw that we could use the char@, method, like this. So the character at 0 is B, at 1 is A, and so on. And recall that starting at 0 like this is called 0 offset. It can get a little confusing, but it's very common in computer programming, so it's important to get used to it. Well, arrays work the same basic way. We can look at the 0th element, the 0 index, with A, and then open bracket and the number of the index. This is an extremely common notation. You'll see this across a huge variety of different programming languages. A of 1, A of 2, and so on. And in fact, this same notation works directly on strings. We can replace char@ with 0, 1, 2, etc. One of the great things about JavaScript arrays is that they're really flexible. They can contain any other types, and in fact, they can contain a mix of types. This is a big step up from more rigid languages like the C programming language that lies at the heart of every Unix system. C arrays can't mix types, but JavaScript is a higher level language, so it can do lots of things that languages like C can't. So let's redefine A. Remember, using let, again, gives us an error, so let's just omit the let. And we can just make a literal array using these square brackets. It's a little confusing that square brackets are used both for element access and for defining literal arrays, but you'll get used to it pretty quickly. So A equals open bracket, here's a string, and then we separate it with commas. As we saw before, the output of the REPL just separates the elements with commas. We can put in an integer, really just a number, as we'll see later on. In chapter 4, JavaScript doesn't actually distinguish between the two. And we can also put in something like this. We can put in a function call. Soliloquy.includes to be. Now this might give you an error. I think it's going to give me an error because I've exited the node REPL, and so soliloquy probably isn't defined. There we go. So let's define it. And I'm just going to copy it from the tutorial. All right, I just switched over to the tutorial on my system and copied it. Oops, and I copied too many double quotes. So there's the soliloquy, and now we can go up arrow, and this should be Badger 42 and true, like that. As before, we can access the elements using the square bracket notation. So A of 2, see if you can eyeball it. That's the third element, which is the Boolean value true.